Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Food, Wine, and Whiskey. I am Rob, your host. Carter back, co-host. How you doing?
I am great. Got something vintage in front of me right now.
It's not too heavy, is it?
No.
Okay.
Yeah, I know.
I want you to go back
hurt
to the
my back
chiropractor.
again. Yeah, I know.
So we've got some guests today. You want to do the honors of introducing some gentlemen?
Yeah. So Leo Arnold back on the show. Got Luis Baston back on the show, and someone new this time, Mr. Allen Richards.
First time on the podcast.
Yes, thank you.
New character unlocked, Allen Richards.
Is he a character? Are you giving us a little pre-warning here?
Oh, it's just like a video game, right?
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we just unlocked a new character.
Yeah.
I thought we were in for a show here. He was going to be a character on the show.
No.
When you level up enough, you start unlocking these really like badass characters.
That's right.
Well, Alan, thanks for coming out and doing this. We really appreciate it. It's a topic today that I've been told you have all kinds of experience in and knowledge that you can share with us.
Well, thanks for inviting me, and I have had the fortune of being able to find a few Dusties over the years, and so glad to share whatever I've learned. Although I was not the first, there's folks here in town that were finding Dusties before I was, and they taught me how to do it.
Okay.
But unfortunately, they skimmed the good stuff. so there's still a few good things left over, but
Hard to find.
they're harder to find, and well, now they're gone. But
So here's my question. One, how long have you been doing the bourbon game and into it in, where you drink a variety of things? I remember back, my grandparents or somebody, they'd find a spirit they liked, and that's what they drank, whether it was Seagram 7 or, Jim Beam or something like that. But I'm getting to the question of, did you have the foresight to collect some bottles where you knew these are going to be later on, they're going to be pretty good, or did it, you drank a little bit and then eventually you went, wait a second, there's something going on here?
yeah, unfortunately, I didn't have the foresight to intentionally, find some of them. I was drinking them. I started with cigars, and was on a bunch of cigar sites, and there was guys talking about something Van Winkle. And so I had to find that.
Never heard of it.
No, yeah, it's kind of not anymore. You don't.
Yeah.
But then I started connecting with other people that became my mentor. First in Scotch, actually, and then eventually bourbon. But started going around to liquor stores here in Houston, and I've probably been to about every one of them.
Yeah.
And found some nice Dusties. So I was fortunate that these guys that made the first pass left a few behind for some of us others to pick up.
Yeah.
Are you talking about Bob as one of your mentors?
Bob Gardner is one of the mentors. Also Wade. I knew Wade back in when I first got started. We met at various events. Specs used to have tastings quite often downtown, and that's where we met. Several people just hanging out on the aisles waiting for the events to start.
Nice.
That's cool.
Yeah, because I've talked to Wade and like Randy Blank, who would tell me stories of the early 2000s, like when BTAC just came out. They were able to go in and buy, a case at a time. He said
Sure.
it would be like 3 in a box, but you just go in every year, just get released. You'd buy 2 cases, whatever you wanted, and then just start putting them away. And I don't know if they thought that they were going to, become what they are today, or if they just were like, I know this is really good. Nobody else wants it. I'm going to put it away so I'll make sure I have it from year to year. That it changed.
I don't think they saw this coming. I think they just knew it was really good and bought it.
Well, and at the time, nobody besides them was willing to pay that much. Bourbon was such a cheap commodity that paying $80 or $60 to $80 was a lot of money, and only they were the ones, quote unquote, crazy enough to spend that much on a specific bourbon, not knowing that it would be as crazy as it is now. Now we'd all, we'd give our left legs to pay $60 for any of those bottles.
Yeah.
In 2007 is when Parker Heritage released the first edition, and I remember seeing it on the shelves at Specs for $70. And I went, oh man! So I did buy a couple of bottles and killed one, but that was painful to pay that much back then.
What you know now, it'd be crazy not to buy as many of them as you could.
Yeah. So quick question. So in your mind, Alan, what is the definition of a Dusty?
I don't think there's a really definite definition. I mean, it's something that's obviously old. Probably 20 years would be kind of a good starting point.
Okay.
But really, the reason it's called a Dusty is because there's dust on it. So
Yeah.
if you pick up a bottle and there's dust on it, then that's a Dusty.
Okay.
I think of a Dusty as, obviously you have these big distilleries that have been making, bourbon or scotches, if we're going to go into that category, for a long time. To me, it's got to be something either different in the process or the mash bill changed somehow. And so it's like no longer available. And one that pops to mind that I've been intrigued with and liked, I've tasted a few, is the rare breeds. How they started. I think it was 92 is when they first came out, and you would see every 3 to 4 years they would change the proof on it anyway. It might not be the mash bill. I don't know if the entry point changed at all. I don't think it did, but it was just the proof would change, and I would be like, okay, that's pretty cool that a 92 is different than a 94, and then a 98 is different than, and so I've taken a couple of rare breeds and put them away, thinking, this 116.8 has been around for 5 or 6 years now.
It's been a while.
I keep thinking they're going to change that again. Mm-hmm. So to me, that's one definition. And then just the process, the stills, the mash bill, the
Entry proof.
things like that.
So one of the biggest. Go ahead.
I was going to say fermentation process, entry proof.
Yeah, I was going to say this. So for Wild Turkey specifically, there's been 2 major changes that I think made the new whiskey different than the old whiskey. And one, like you mentioned, is entry proof. The entry proof used to be much lower, and then they used to do open fermentation in cedar tanks before, and then obviously they now changed to stainless steel. So those are 2 big changes to their process that make the whiskey now different from the whiskey back then. But like Alan mentioned, Dusty's such like a ambiguous term. I generally think, before the 2000s, you start seeing some of the differences in Wild Turkey specifically, which I feel like is like the standard bearer for what people call Dusty.
Is that the
bourbon.
standard? That was a question I had. Is Wild Turkey the standard? Is that what it's what I see the most of when you look at, things that are, available that you can, find somewhere that's a Dusty.
I mean, I would say it's probably like the most well-known standard of a Dusty, but if you think about, like, Alan brought Old Granddad, so OGD, and like the thing that makes that Dusty is not only the age but the DSP. So it went from National Distillers to Beam, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep.
And for those of you that don't know what DSP is, just like the designation number of the distillery. You change from distillery to now it's owned by Jim Beam. So Jim Beam is making Old Granddad. So they own the brand, but the whiskey is obviously a lot different distillery, different process.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So you heard me mention that I want to continue to try to create some of my own Dusties. Is that a thing, or am I just spinning my wheels? Can you put some bottles away of some things that you think, can change or might change or might go away and just kind of tuck them away, and in 10, 15 years you've got some more Dusties?
I mean, I would say it's more of subtle changes to me in terms of what you can do now. Like, for example, it's like in between 2010 and 2020 when Four Roses went from gold label to leather necks, and then you've got, your screw top OWA versus your gold foil. And so just subtle changes, and as time goes on, those are going to become more rare, right? Because people are just going to drink what they have available.
So they like the new Wild Turkey as well?
Yeah.
With the new label, new glass?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yep.
But I don't think the whiskey's actually changing. So when you say like creating new Dusties, maybe they will change their process and the entry proof and whatever. So the whiskey that we get in the future might be different than the one we have now. And the one we have now in the future might become sought after just because it doesn't exist anymore. But if you ask Wade, the whiskey doesn't change in the bottle.
Oh, I agree with that.
So you're not creating Dusties by stat. You know what I'm saying?
No, I'm thinking, I get your point there. I'm saying that they are going to change the process. The example of rare breed, I think the 116.8, I've heard rumors that they're going to change it and try to get it closer to the 120 mark and then make a release of this is the new standard for however long for the new rare breed. Whether that happens or not, I have no idea, but that's, the rumor.
I think one thing to look for is just changes in the process. If you identify when a producer makes a change, you might put back some from that previous era and see how it compares to the new era. I mean, look at every distiller now; they're doubling capacity, and so there's got to be some process changes coming along pretty soon.
Here's another question that I get from talking about this: age of the whiskey that's in the bottle, even though it might be the same whiskey, same profile and everything. We talk about everybody's just going crazy for bourbon, and these distillers are trying to keep up, and they're having a hard time doing it. So now what you see is the standard of 6 year, 8 year, that 9 year, 6 to 9 year kind of range. Could that change in 3 to 5 years? What you're going to get in the bottle that's considered the standard anymore?
I think it will. I think a lot of the distilleries have dropped the age statement so that they could start putting younger product in. I think when they start after this capacity has time to age, I think you may see some of the age statements come back.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say as well. If you take Buffalo Trace, for example, they're like, more than doubling their production ability. And I think as you see people get into other spirits, right, like right now, like a lot of people are getting into agave, rum, that there might not be as much demand for bourbon. And so it could potentially bring back like another glut era,
Yeah.
But also at the same time, there's already brands that are already pushing out younger whiskey as their standard. Brown-Forman, for example, their single barrel offerings for Old Forester are 4 to 6 years old, and that's like that's their standard. That's what their normal product is, 4 to 6 years old. And I think there's other companies kind of going towards that just because you can put out a lot more product without having to age it for
Yeah,
so.
but
Free
it's
up barrel.
It's a heat cycled warehouse.
So it's really a lot older.
Oh, it's a 9 year then. Is that from?
Is that why it's so bitter?
Yeah.
Okay.
That must be from your favorite distiller.
Brown-Forman.
They microwave the barrels.
Well, one thing that I think is like important to mention is, talking about the bourbon glut period of time.
Yeah.
Like when did that start? Roughly, would you say like in the 70s, that kind of thing?
I don't go back that far, so I don't have the knowledge, but I would say it probably in that 70s. And one of the things you see is characterized by the decanters because they couldn't sell it. So they're trying all these gimmicks to try and get people to buy product.
And I think those
decanters.
were late 70s,
It was 70s into the 80s. Yeah.
So what I hear is that, how this all started, of course, clear liquors started becoming more and more popular and that kind of thing. But like you've got your post-war guys that were used to drinking bourbon that were, they were into it. But then as they aged, their kids didn't want to do anything that they wanted to do. So, between that and then the popularity of clear liquors, that's when you've got to plan for all this production.
Yep.
So if you're planning 20 years in advance and it dies, then
it's a challenge. Yeah.
Well, I think that the rise of the popularity also have to do with like the misconception that clear liquor is somehow healthier for you than
was
brown
that part
liquor.
of the perception?
Yeah. So like clear liquors are supposedly healthier. They're cleaner. To this day, I talk to friends, peers that are like, oh, I can't drink dark liquor because it makes me feel a certain way, thinking that chemically it's somehow different.
Kind of like sulfites in wine?
Yes.
Think it'll make them sick.
Exactly right. Oh, I can't drink dark
There's more
liquor 'cause
sulfites in orange juice than there is in wine.
Yes. That's a perfect analogy.
But I think one of the things going back to the age, in the glut era, because they have so much sitting around, what they're putting in the bottle is probably much older than the age statement on the bottle. And so as you get to newer product, the age statement starts approaching what's on the label. So it's going to change flavor just because of the age.
I do agree that the process is, there's certainly something to the process factor. But if you look at an old Wild Turkey 8 101 from like the 80s or something like that, you pretty much know that there's a lot older than 8 years.
There's some 15-year-old whiskey in there.
Yeah, and I think that probably adds more to it than anything.
Mm-hmm.
But
Thanks a lot of it.
But
I was going to say
combination of all these things. So,
sorry,
yeah,
go
man.
wrapping up. I didn't mean to step on your toes.
It's
there.
okay. I'm used to it.
You got to take it easy on you, especially with that back.
I know, man. This is the
Can't have a bad
problem with
back.
aging.
That's right.
And a bad big toe.
Yeah.
Papa Carter, take it easy on them.
Yeah. The bourbon's helping though.
Yeah, so I was thinking one thing, you guys were talking about like process changes, entry proof fermentation. Another thing that could be a marked difference could be like a change in master distiller. So we've seen a couple changes in master distillers. You got Old Forester, Jack Daniels has had some changes recently, and the example that I would use is when it went from Jim Rutledge to Brent Elliott with Four Roses, and so I had the opportunity to talk to Jim probably months ago. One of the things that he talked about in his process that was different was the way that they were sourcing grains for their mash bill. And so like we were talking about like a particular recipe in a run that was like really great, and he was just like, the ryes that we sampled from Germany that year were just like phenomenal, that went into the mash bill. And one of the things that he would do differently than what they're doing today is that they would source grain from everywhere and just sample it, and then they would pick the best of what they could get that year to start making whiskey. And one of the changes that they've made today with Brent Elliott, to my knowledge, which may be completely inaccurate, is that they're looking for more consistency, and so they don't vary grain sources as much.
Yeah,
He just pulled a Carter humble brag.
Yeah, I know. I know. Just on the phone
Me
with
and Brent
Jim
were
Rutledge,
talking.
no big deal, whatever. I was on that call too, so. But
Boy, you can't get one past him.
just saying. No, but I mean, it is interesting. It's an interesting point because I mean, you think of like wine, right? I mean, you've got years that you've had good weather, years that you had bad weather. How much does that actually affect, say, like grains and how they act in a mash bill and all that kind of stuff? I mean, there's probably something to it. I don't know if it's not going to be as significant as wine, but maybe there is some subtle differences there.
I mean, one thing we haven't talked about that I think is even more important than the grain, though, is the wood itself. So I feel like most distillers and most people that are in bourbon tell you that like 70% of the flavor you're getting is from the wood.
Yeah.
And the wood that we have now is different. Every year they're cutting down younger trees and the wood grains. If you look at barrels that they were using, 50, 60 years ago, and you look at the grain, it was like super tight grain, super small. And now because of water, because of pollution, because of everything, just how the trees are different, the grain is a lot thicker from year to year.
Yeah.
The growth is a lot faster. So you're getting less of those wood sugars. You're getting, or even if not less, different types of esters and everything in the bourbon itself, because the wood is a lot different than what they were using 20, 30, 50.
That's a great point.
Yeah.
Because you're right. I know it is. The wood makes a huge difference, and it is a big part of imparting that flavor.
That's what she said.
That's what she said.
There you go.
Leo knows the show.
He knows the show, yeah. But I mean, it's just natural. I mean, you have so much more of a demand on making barrels, getting barrels out the door and everything.
And it has to be American oak. I mean,
Yeah,
there
so
is no
they're
like
probably-
wine where you can play around with French or
So going to the subject of Scotch, Dr. Bill Lumsden with Glenmorangie, he sources his barrels for the Scotch from the American oak. They generally go through Jack Daniels.
They don't use bourbon, huh?
That's funny.
It is bourbon.
Oh, okay.
Oh, really?
For the record.
Yeah.
But when he's sourcing the wood specifically for his barrels, he has specifications into the number of rings that the wood can have. He has a minimum and a maximum because he wants to make sure that it's gone through certain seasons and it's not too hot, not too dry, too cold, or whatever causes the rings. And so he's got that affects the tightness of the wood.
Yeah, that's really interesting.
So he's got a specification for the number of rings.
I mean, that makes perfect
Interesting.
sense. I mean, with like what I connects directly with what I was saying, like the wood's so different, and that's his way of making a consistent product.
Making a consistent product, yeah.
That's pretty impressive. What are I want to get into kind of the distillers that are like the most sought after, that are thought to have, really good juice back then that people are chasing, and then kind of start to go through some of the bottles you guys have brought today and just talking about them and what makes them, different and unique and why everybody's kind of, in the bourbon craze, everybody's chasing things like this, or would love to, at least have a sip of some of this stuff.
I mean, turkey is one of the first that comes to mind, right?
But is it the most coveted because is it just we see it so much because there's so much of it available?
It's just a big brand that's been there for years and years and years, and they
with the same family. Basically.
Yeah, and they produce tons and tons of product. So I think it's a easy one to point to. If you look up here and you go like you're looking at some of the bottles, you look at Anderson Club. Well, who knows what the heck that is, really?
So the Anderson Club is actually it's Heaven Hill.
I know that, but what I'm saying is you
don't know where it's being sourced from.
Yeah.
It's
you got clear. On Wild Turkey, you know where that's coming from,
right?
So anyway, that's just the one that first comes to mind. But
I mean, I'm a big data guy, right? So if I was going to say most coveted, I would just go by secondary price point.
Got to be Stitzel, right?
Yeah, and I would say Stitzel-Weller is up there at the top in terms of most coveted with people that are bourbon enthusiasts, especially that are knowledgeable about Dusty's. And then I think it would go probably Bernheim stuff after that.
DSB.
That's one I don't
DSB
know.
too.
Bernheim. I've never heard that one.
Really?
Oh,
Yeah. So
no.
what are some products that would be out that you would go?
Well, even
Old Weller Antique.
okay, that's
Yeah.
Bernheim.
Well, not even just Weller. I think Allen shared a Weller Special Reserve from the early 2000s. That was Bernheim.
All the Wellers in the 2000s before they switched to Buffalo Trace was Bernheim.
I did not know
Old
that.
Fitz as well moved to Bernheim.
Yeah, it was originally Stitzel Weller, then it moved to Bernheim, and then to Buffalo Trace.
Okay, see, I didn't know that one was in there. I knew the Stitzel-Weller, but I'd never heard. Yeah.
And honestly, to me, everybody freaks out about Stitzel-Weller, but to me, the Bernheim has this Bernheim funk to it, kind of like Old Wild Turkey has this funkiness to it, that to me is so much more interesting than Stitzel-Weller. I feel like Stitzel-Weller is maybe not one note, but it's consistently one flavor profile that is very approachable, very kind of right down the middle for whatever you think bourbon should taste like, and it's very, very delicious. But I feel like Bernheim is a little bit more complex, is a little bit...
It's a little sweeter. I get a little more cherry note on it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And I to me, in general, I prefer the Bernheim profile of the Weller line versus the Stitzel-Weller.
So if you're going to say most coveted being Stitzel-Weller based on price point, I mean, what would you say, Alan, is unique about Stitzel-Weller, specifically the Dusty stuff?
Well, I mean, other than just being really good.
Yeah, really great.
And you can't find it. They don't make
Yeah.
it. They closed in 92. So a lot of it's just driven by scarcity.
Mm-hmm.
Is it Castle and Key that runs out of the old distillery now?
I think did Bullet or something was running out of that distillery now. I'm pretty sure.
Castle and Key?
No, the one that's in Louisville.
I'm not sure.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's Bullet, actually.
Stitzel-Weller is distillery 16, DSP 16, and I'm not sure who's doing that now.
I don't think they make much out of it,
Yeah.
if they do. But
I mean, it's just property. It's not going to. They don't have the same stills, I'm sure, do they?
oh no, I
Probably
don't
not.
think
Yeah,
so.
so, I mean,
So
it's just land.
the yeast, and
Yeah.
it's all changed.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I seem to remember that reading something. I don't know if I recall correctly, but one of the things that Stitzel-Weller used to market a lot was the entry proof, which was unique versus some other producers during that time.
Oh, really? Do you know what it was? Because I don't know that.
I can't think of it off the top of my head.
So that makes me ask the question: is there something, in today's bourbon craze, everybody wants a barrel proof, something with a higher proof. It seems to be what everybody thinks is the way to drink the whiskey. Back in the day, it seemed like the entry point was a lot lower, which to me kind of made sense because I would think, they were proofing more things down. You're going to get a better flavor. Is that part of the process of kind of figuring out what's really good from back in the day?
Well, the lower entry proof, bourbon generally goes up in proof as it ages. The water evaporates, the proof gets higher. If you go in with a lower entry proof, you're more likely to have a desirable proof at the end versus having to add some water to bring it back down. So you get more of the pure product.
Flavor of the product, yeah.
Yeah, and I feel like in general, though, now people are getting too crazy about the barrel proof hype. Just like the recent Stag Junior releases that are hazmat.
140, yeah.
Going for 700 plus on secondary is just silly. For me, at least in my bourbon journey, when you first start, you're not used to high proof stuff, so you're drinking lower proof stuff, and then once you get used to higher proof stuff, at least for me, I only sought out. I wanted the highest proof stuff because I thought I was like, oh, this has the most flavor. But once you kind of get past that, you realize that you lose a little bit of nuance at those super, super high proofs. And for me, I feel like the sweet spot is, like 105 to 115 maybe, or like 100 to 115. I feel like that proof point is, especially if it's barrel strength, like it has the highest amount of flavor concentration versus, or perceived concentration versus some of the other crazy high proof stuff.
I agree. I actually love that like 100 to 115. That's kind of just like I like living there and thinking about like we talk about this a lot, but like as not a Dusty, but something that's available currently, like Maker's Mark cask strength at like 109. I think they enter the barrel at like 106, 107, something like that. To me, that's just great on the shelf, current good stuff.
Weeded bourbon.
Yeah.
I just looked up a newspaper article where Stitchwell is advertising, and they the first run would be at 85 proof, and then they would distill it again to 117, and then they would dilute it to 103 before it went into the barrel.
Interesting. That is unique.
Yeah.
Very cool. Yeah. I mean, I've had the pleasure of trying some of the Stitzel Weller stuff. It's pretty darn good. I'd love to do like a side by side of like a Weller from Bernheim and a Weller.
Have
from
you
Stitzel.
had one?
I've never done it like a blind comparison.
No, but you've had the Bernheim.
Yeah, I have.
Okay.
Yeah.
If I have, I didn't know I had, so I don't think I ever have.
One of the things that I really love about Dusty's, though, is that going back to the proof aspect of it, I feel like modern era whiskeys, we talked about how 100 to 115 is kind of like the sweet spot. And I feel like a big part of that is finish and texture. I feel like a lot of modern whiskeys at 80 to 100 proof are very thin and kind of fall off. And I don't know if it's because of the older stock that we were talking about earlier in the Dustys, but the texture I feel like is much richer. They're a little bit more creamy or oily, and the finish just lasts for days, even at 86 proof.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
Even at 90 proof, even at 93 proof. For whatever reason, they feel more complex and more just rich on the palate than modern era whiskeys do.
Yeah, I would say like they drink above their proof. So like you can have like an 86 and it's like, well, it feels like 100 proof bourbon that I may be drinking today, and they're much richer and full bodied as well.
Oh yeah, and what's really amazing, like some of these, I'm just looking at the Anderson Club, so that's the reason I'm going to mention it. But the nose on that whiskey is just unbelievable, and you're like, man, this is sub 90 proof whiskey. I mean, this is like, this doesn't add up in like modern perception. So yeah, I agree.
Do you think that kind of holds true also with the Scotch, Alan? Because I haven't really had too many Dusty Scotches. Do you find it similarly also that the older ones have a little bit more richness, or do you think there's not a huge contrast between the newer and the older because the process of staying within the family and are a lot more similar?
I haven't seen as much difference in the Scotch and some of the older Scotches. But I also find that I can enjoy Scotches at a much lower proof than bourbon. Just they have that texture and mouthfeel, the flavor.
Yeah, I would agree.
Something about it. I'm good with a 86, 92 proof Scotch. In fact, that's what most of them are. There's not that many higher proof. There's getting to be more, but just I think it's the bourbon fad's pushing some of them to use a higher proof. But it's kind of odd that the flavor profile doesn't get thin like it does in bourbon at those lower proofs.
Yeah, I would agree with you as well, though, that you can get much more from a Scotch at a lower proof than a bourbon at the same level.
But is that because of the weather over there? Part of it? Because it can age it so long without having to lose so much to the angel share?
That's part of it. Yeah, I think so.
And the proof going kind of out of control.
Yeah.
Well, and generally, in opposite from Kentucky, Scotch tends to go down in proof as it ages. So I think it gets a little thicker, a little creamier.
So here's a question I have. I don't think distillers do this, but why wouldn't they? I just kind of thought about this. We talk about entry proof, It's the same for whatever product, right? When distillers have one, it's usually the same for whatever product they're making. So what if it's a barrel proof, it comes out, it's bottled or whatever. But if it's something else that needs to be watered down, why don't they adjust barrel proof entry proof depending on the product they're making to try to get a maximized flavor in the bottle for the consumer?
It's called accountants.
I was literally about to say, for me, it's about maximizing profit,
profits.
flavor.
Profits.
But how does that affect?
Well, because if they put it at a lower entry proof, then it's going to come out at a lower proof, so there's less product because they can't add as much water to it.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Economies of scale, right?
Yeah. And I mean, I'd say, like, I don't know, when did Turkey make their entry proof change? Back in, like, early 2000s or something like that?
No. It was, I think it was earlier than that. I think it was late 80s, early 90s that they...
Okay. Yeah. There is a marked difference from... I don't know if you've ever tried...
2006 for Wild Turkey.
Okay. Yeah.
When did they change the cedar tanks?
That was earlier.
Okay.
That may be
That's
what
what
you're
I-
thinking
yeah.
of, yeah.
Yeah. But I do think, like, even some of the early 2000s Turkey stuff still has some dusty qualities to it. And then once you kind of get past that, you know, and maybe it has to do with the barrel entry
Isn't it
point or something.
2003 when they changed?
That's when they changed the proof, but I think earlier the entry proof, but they changed from
still?
cedar tank fermentation to stainless steel.
When did they change
More
that?
sterile. I think that was late 90s, early 2000s.
Oh, what? Okay. I thought it was all right around 2002, 2003, but you would know better than me. So,
Yeah, but anyway, I do think that there's something to that barrel entry proof. I mean, there's something about that because a lot of dusty bourbon was entered at a way lower proof than 125.
Yeah, it's
like
much
most of
higher
it is.
today than it was in the past.
Yeah.
And that's why I think light whiskey, I don't know if you're familiar with the term light whiskey. So one of the changes between light whiskey and bourbon is they can
Entry
use,
proof, yeah.
Is they can reuse oak barrels. And the entry proof can be way higher. Like almost as high as vodka, I think like 180. It can go
do
to
they
a
distill
barrel.
it 9 times?
I think with light whiskey, they're just trying to sell as much as they can, so they probably only distill it once or twice.
Gotcha.
So and a lot of distillers will tell you that the way that the alcohol interacts with the barrel at a higher proof is much different than it does at a lower proof, and you're pulling different things out of the barrel. Because at that proof, alcohol is like a super strong solvent, so it's gonna pull out almost everything. So it's not just gonna pull out the sugars
And the speed, right, at
Yeah.
which it pulls it out.
You're getting the tannins, and it's more susceptible to temperature changes, and because there's less water in it, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
So
obviously the years that pass by, weather makes a big difference too. Hot years is going to get it to be absorbed, and then colder, and it's going to play an effect.
So we should start the lower entry proof movement.
I'm already, trumpeting that that change. We should start going to lower entry proof.
That's right.
Okay, so we
Don't think they're going to listen.
Stitzel-Weller, Burnham. Who else? National.
Oh, Granddad. National Distillers.
national distillers, for sure.
Yeah, but OGD, but it's National Distillers specific.
Right.
When did they go defunct?
Which is like pre
late-
92, right?
I was gonna say 92. Yeah.
Yeah.
Pre-92.
So Beam bought them out in about 88. And so there was a transition period. So if you got 4 or 5 years, so they would
Of stock, yeah.
have been transitioning the stock around 92.
Right.
But that was around 88 that Beam actually bought them.
And there's a lot of different ways for different products to tell where they're from. For Old Grandad in particular, the UPC code on the back
Yeah.
of them. I think it's like 08065. Okay.
86259.
86259.
Okay, he knows that.
Yeah. He knew what I was talking about. So if you check on the back of it, it has that UPC code. It's still old National Distiller Juice, but after that, it's Beam Juice,
Which means it's going to be a butterscotch bomb. Right?
yeah, if it's National Distillers, yeah.
Oh, yeah. That stuff is ridiculous.
Or
Have you had
there's-
that, Rob?
No,
Oh, God. It's so good.
really.
And it's
Oh, yeah.
86 proof. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's good.
What's the one you brought?
So I brought
Not today. The one you brought that was like 80 some proof. It was that was just delicious from the 80s.
well,
It's
no,
like the spirit of is the one in the box.
I think you might be thinking about the Weller Special Reserve pick that I brought.
No,
No, okay.
no, it's a brand that I go. Oh, I need to look for those. You said they're not very expensive on if you find them?
It was probably the Ezra Brooks, one of these guys.
So that was another brand that I was going to mention. So
That's what it was.
the Ezra Brooks, a lot of them are Old Medley distillate, and I feel like Old Medley is another one of those brands that's
It's up and
very,
coming
very,
in
very
the
highly
Dusty scene.
regarded. The secondary pricing for, especially the ryes, the Old Medley, Cream of Kentucky rye stuff are very, very up there on highly sought after bottles.
So that's
from
what
the
was
time.
in the early Van Winkle Family Reserve rye, 13-year-old.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that's like
Cream of Kentucky.
it's like a whole new category that we really haven't even gotten into is the rye dusty aspect of it because so like a lot of the Maryland stuff was really good.
Old Pennsylvania, the old Pennsylvania ryes are insane.
Are they out there? I don't see those.
No, I mean, so some of the best pour I've ever had to this day is Red Hook Rye, which is one of those early Van Winkle. I think it was Julian, right? That picked those
It
bottles.
is a private bottling.
And those right now in secondary are going for like $40K.
Are you serious?
Yeah, like they're
Wow.
they're very up there.
Yeah, it's just buy a new car or get a bottle of rye.
Yeah, I mean,
It's a pretty easy
Well,
choice.
I was more surprised that they're that cheap. I might get two.
yeah,
Kinda
double
what-
up.
That's what
you
I
know.
was thinking. I was like,
Or,
oh,
or
that's
you, or
it?
you're thinking like 40 grand on a car. Like, what are you driving?
40 grand doesn't go as far these days. I could say that.
You know, somebody that just bought 2 cars, man. You're telling me, man.
Yeah.
Oh, and drove a Lambo this week.
Well, I did drive a Lambo this week. Okay,
I
so
don't need your glass.
no, I was going to get Leo to
Oh.
pour me some of that because I haven't had that Ezra Brooks. I don't think. Okay, so
How about you, Alan?
I'll take a little bit.
what about the Seagram's like Eagle Rares? I mean, where was that distilled exactly? Is it a distillery that exists anymore?
So was it Old Prentice?
Oh, I think Eagle Rare was originally Old Prentice,
Yeah.
but I'm not as familiar with its history.
Okay.
It went through 3 generations. There was Lawrenceburg, Old Prentice, and New Orleans.
Sazerac, yeah.
Sazerac.
Sazerac's had it for quite a while.
Yep.
So the bottles that we see, those old squat bottles and stuff of Eagle Rare, are they what's the current mash bill, or are they a whole different process back then? I don't even know what year those are from.
Well, I was gonna say it depends because like they're labeled differently.
Okay.
So some of them will say Lawrenceburg on there, and those are obviously from there. Some of them will say Old Prentice, and that like affects secondary value. But I think that the more highly regarded ones are the Lawrenceburg ones, because obviously that's the oldest one, Old Prentice, and then the New
And I think
Orleans bottlings.
in terms of ranking, you're like Stitchweller, Bernheim. Would you say that National Distillers, OGD, and Eagle Rare are kind of on a level playing field in terms of where they fall?
Some of those early Eagle Rares I'd put a little above even Old
Yeah.
Grandad. Although, I mean, Old
Yeah.
Grandad is definitely the caramel bomb, but early Eagle Rares were,
Yeah.
were great.
Yeah, I haven't had a lot of Eagle Rare, but I just know, like, for me, I'm much more aware of Old Grandad.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like maybe there's not as much Eagle Rare around, the older stuff, but I know that it's, in terms of, like, price point, it's very well thought of.
Yeah, the Elberg Eagle Rares are very highly sought after. I think they're all over like $1,000, and they're some of the better pours that you can. That's kind of still exists. But going back to what we were talking about, decanters, there's a lot of whiskey that because it was put into a decanter versus a bottle, that you can get the same or similar whiskey at a much cheaper price point. So the old Ezra 15-year 101 bottles are, I think, secondary, definitely over $1,000, maybe I think $1,500. But you can still get maybe like $1,200 to $1,500. But you can get a decanter of a 15101 for like $5,000 to $6,000. Same thing with the old Ezra Brooks bottle. Same thing with the Eagle Rare 10101s. The bottles themselves are very, very pricey. The decanted version are
that-
much more
And
affordable.
the good
Because
thing,
of the risk that people worry about?
well, I don't think it's as much risk as it is the stigma of the decanter and like the lead and
That's what I'm talking about
Yeah.
when I say
the
risk.
great thing about the decanter is if you do buy one, you can usually buy it pending clarity and fill level. and so there isn't a lot of risk associated with the purchase. And there's, Wade does Tater Talk, and I think recently he had a Tater Talk that somebody else did in HBS, and they publish like how much of a decanter you can drink within a sitting or within a couple of weeks and not have to worry about it. And it was like basically safer drinking a decanted bourbon than it is Houston tap water.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
So they tested the amount of lead in like parts per million in like I think 15 different samples of old decanted whiskey.
Yeah.
And they found except
some of them were high.
There was one bottle. I think it was a Beam decanter maybe. But everything else was like at or below Houston tap water level.
Oh, wow.
That's interesting because I always heard that when I said risk, I was talking about the lead risk because people would say don't drink, what's in those. It's because of that.
And I was going to say, like Alan talked earlier about when he was kind of like had some mentors that helped him out with hunting Dusties, and they hadn't bought everything yet. And so he was able to get some stuff with decanters. That's another thing that, I still talk to folks that will score on decanters for like super cheap than going to estate sales. Right. And so you have estate sales and even finding some bottled whiskey as well in estate sales. And, but decanters specifically because they're like decoration and somebody has them sitting on a shelf.
Yeah.
They never got opened. And so you could buy one at an estate sale for like $30 and get really great whiskey that you'd pay much more on through secondary.
Yeah. A buddy of mine scored I think like a 1962 Old Grandad 86 proof for like $35 unopened at some. He restores cast iron cookware, so that's what he was there for. And they pulled out a bottle of Old Grandad. They're like, we don't know if this is still good. $30, anybody will take it. And he was like, I'll take it. And Leo was mentioning earlier the butterscotch bomb quality of National Distiller. The older they get, the more concentrated butterscotch flavor it was. And it's like, one of the great pours I've had, and he got it for $30 on estate sale.
Wow.
That's a very anticlimactic fresh crack.
That's a twisty fresh crack.
I was expecting it to be like, clack.
Yeah.
Just so people know there's no cork in this one. It's a twisty.
Yeah, twist top, Anderson Hill. This is Luis's bottle, 15 years. Do you know what year this one is from?
I think that was a 96, 95?
96?
Yeah.
So distilled early 80s.
Yeah. So one of the things we didn't talk about, like some of the changes that can happen for Heaven Hill was a lightning strike, right?
Mm-hmm. Pre-fire.
So lightning struck the distillery. If you didn't know, alcohol is highly combustible, and it ended up burning up.
Oh, really?
Yeah. It ended up burning up a huge amount of the distillery and their juice. So with Heaven Hill specifically, the way they refer to the dustier stuff is pre-fire. So I think the fire was in 98, 88, something with an 8.
Okay.
Yeah, but Heaven Hill specifically is it's either pre-fire or post-fire, and pre-fire would be your dusty stuff.
So here's a question I have.
Oh, 96 when it burned out.
Why with two, I don't know what the right adjective to describe them, but I'll say kind of historic or at least, been around a long time, Beam and Jack Daniels, you don't see what's, if it's there, I don't know about it, what's kind of dusty from them. And you would think with the time that they've been around making products, there would be something that would be around a little bit more than what I do see.
Well, part of it is that neither one of those ever produced what I would call a high-end product. You had Jim Beam Black.
They're behind the bar stuff is all they're...
That's about all they made. It's only recently that I've seen some of the single barrels come out, some of the special bottlings. Jim Beam didn't make Baker's, Booker's,
Knob Creek
until 80s, kind of the 80s era. So if you go back beyond that, you basically had Beam White, Beam Black. And some of those are pretty good. I've got some Jim Beam Black that was still 8-year age stated. And that's some decent product.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. That flies really under the radar. And one of their employees in Houston he was like, "Hey, listen, this old Jim Beam Black is like really great," and shared some of it with me, and it's definitely, I mean, I would say holds up to some of the stuff that we're drinking right now.
But I believe it was in the '80s, Jack Daniel's was 90 proof, and I forget what year that changed. I've actually got a little mini bottle of 90 proof Jack Daniel's, and it's back to the '70s or '80s. So that's one change that they made.
So for me, I was going to say that one of the big reasons, though, that those Dusties aren't necessarily that highly sought after is what Alan said, but also they've been so consistent in their flavor profile from back then. They've almost made no changes. So the whiskey you're drinking now is very, very similar to the whiskey you were drinking back then. So it's not like Wild Turkey that they had two major changes. It's not like Heaven Hill where there was this giant fire. The Jim Beam profile that you're drinking now is very similar to the Jim Beam profile you were drinking 30 or 40 years ago. So it's not as highly sought after because it's not that different.
But I'm just thinking,
unless you drink that Baker's over there.
Well, but I'm also, to your point, Luis, I'm thinking wood has to be different, which means it's not as good as what used to be.
Yeah.
And I don't know what kind of tanks they use, but I'm sure they didn't use stainless steel way back then. They probably used the cedar. I don't know either.
Yeah.
But I would think because of just those kind of things, there would have been something that you would go, this was made with these that they had to change because of wood or tanks or something that would have been classified as better. And maybe it's there and it just doesn't get the love and the hype that people.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure there were some changes, but like you said, a big part of it was that their product was not a luxury brand product.
Yeah.
It was a behind the bar kind of product. And then on top of that, the flavor profile is so similar. So if you were to side by side Dusty Turkey with like an old A101 versus a new A101, they're extremely different. If you were to side by side and you like a Jim Beam, their standard flagship product versus something from like the 80s, it's not. I think the older stuff is definitely better. And I think they do kind of fly under the radar because some of those old decanters you can still get for like $50, $60.
Yeah.
And they're definitely better. But it's not a huge shift. Like the flavor profile is very similar. They weren't using that much older stock in it to blend in. It's been more of a kind of mainstay consistent product. And that's the conversations that I've had.
Yeah, and that makes sense.
With bourbon back then.
With Jack Daniels, I mean, I feel like it's like, Jack on the rocks, right? And so it wasn't ever
Jack
something
and Coke.
Jack and Coke. It wasn't ever something that was intended to be drank neat, which may have affected like the quality when they were producing the product. And what Alan was talking about with like special releases is, when I think about Jack Daniels right now, I think about like they never had like a different type of. It wasn't older. It wasn't a different proof. It was just a different bottle.
Yeah.
Right. And so they have like these centennial release and it's just a different bottle. And it hasn't been until recently that Jack Daniels has started doing like premium releases, right? Where you see
the heritage, Coy Hill.
Yeah. Well, have you guys had any of the makers, like the gold top makers or anything like that?
I mean, that's something that we haven't talked about, but I hear that those. I haven't had any Dusty makers, but I hear that they can be pretty good.
Yeah, I have not had them. I see them on secondary, and I'm curious about it because I have heard from some reliable sources that they're pretty good.
We should do a bottle split.
Yeah, I'm down. Yeah, for sure.
Alan, have you had any old makers?
I have. It's been a while, and I do remember them being pretty good. I don't remember specifics right now, but I've had some old makers. I think Randy Swetlick had some, and probably had some over at Wade's. But it is quite tasty.
I've never even have heard people hyping them up. I feel like that one's definitely one that flies under the radar. That's
doesn't
not
get
really
much attention.
Yeah, it's not really talked about.
So all the Dusties that we see today, they're still not all of them, but a lot of them. There's still those producers are still around, other than like Stitchwell and things. But those products are still around. Is there something that is still around the distiller, but what they're making today is just not good, but what they made back in the day was really, really good? And that, that's kind of a trick question. I don't know if there's anything like that. I'm just wondering if there's something.
Like a product on the shelf today that hasn't necessarily changed ownership. It didn't go out of business and then get revived later.
Yeah,
see,
maybe just change process, change something. But they used to make good juice. Now it's like,
so many new producers are reviving old brands. So it's
like Michter's.
Ezra Brooks, like Lux Row. Lux Row now owns Ezra Brooks. So before, they used to be sourcing from a lot of different people. Lux Row bottom. Now they're making their own whiskey, and it's definitely different. I still think it's good. Like the Ezra Brooks barrel strength stuff is quality whiskey for the price point, but it's not as quality as it was before. So I don't know if there's any. I don't know if you can think of any distilleries that were making great juice before and they fallen off. No. It's more like those distilleries died. And now they're getting revived by somebody else for the name. What's the big one?
Well, and I would say that one example of like
I have one.
You've got that dusty bottle of Old Fitzgerald, which they've got the decanters now that they're releasing, and some of those have been, highly rated. I haven't tasted a lot of them, but I hear that they're good. It's in this Heaven Hill as well, which they do really good special releases too.
Those,
yeah.
Well, I want to bring one up and see if you disagree with me.
Okay.
From what I've read and heard and kind of understand, thought Four Roses kind of falls into that category. That they made some really bad stuff in the 70s and 80s, weren't that good, but now on the reverse of it, but now make really.
Well,
good.
I was thinking of it the other way around.
Okay.
I thought you were saying it was good. Now it's not as good.
Or the other way.
But I would agree with you. So like. The stuff that they were releasing in the U.S. market back in, say, like the 80s and early 90s was a bunch of blended whiskey, and the stuff that they were doing overseas was not blended. It was bourbon, and so if you get some of those older Four Roses that are overseas releases, those can be good. For example, like I bought it was not a decanter, but it was like a special bottle of Four Roses from like the late 80s, and it was a U.S. release. And I think I paid more for the shipping label than I did the bottle because the bourbon in it is like pretty much worthless, right? So it's just like decoration.
Because it's a cool story.
Yeah.
The history is, yeah.
I think the one labeled, is it Premier?
Premium whiskey,
Yeah,
Four Roses premium whiskey.
It's not
yeah.
good.
Yeah, so I bought a bottle of it because it looks cool.
It does.
And, reached out to somebody at Fort, and they were like, yeah, it's trash. It's like, it's got, like, bourbon, Canadian whiskey. Like, it's just got
really?
Some of it's, like, neutral grain spirits, food coloring.
So what they did is Four Roses decided that they were going to be international only. They're going to be export only. So all the stuff that they were distilling and making got sent overseas to Japan, whereas the stuff that was being sold here was basically what he was saying.
And that's
all source, neutral grain spirit.
Yeah. And it was because it was like the bourbon was just sitting on shelves in the United States, right? And it was selling elsewhere. So they're like, we're just going to put something on the shelf here, send all our good stuff where it's selling.
Because I think about a lot of wild turkey product comes from Japan, because of that. And I'm going to say I give wild turkey credit to whatever level that would be, deserved to them. Because even today they make releases of some really good stuff. Their new 12-year.
The new 12-101
is only overseas in Japan.
Yeah.
Where
really
people
good.
go, why aren't, there's a bourbon craze here in America. Why aren't they releasing it here? And I'm going, well, in the 70s and 80s, nobody wanted to support them, and that market did. So, I'm like, good for them.
The Blanton's brand is not owned by like Sazerac. Basically, it's owned by a Japanese company.
Sure, well, a lot of them are.
That's why they have their own
like contract
releases.
distilled.
Yeah, like that's why they have exactly. Their contract distilling at, because nobody wanted to buy it back then, so a Japanese company saw the opportunity. They're like, we'll buy this brand if you continue to make it, and we'll purchase all of it. And that's why some of the best Blandons, and I think the reason Blandons got its hype is because some of those old Takaras. We have one here. And all Blandons from like the late 80s to the early 90s is really good bourbon. The first time I had ever tried it, I got blinded on it. I had somebody send me a sample, didn't tell me what it was. And when I tried it, I was like, damn, this tastes like really, 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 really good Buffalo Trace. But I couldn't think of a single product that had that much texture, that had that much depth of flavor and complexity at that low of proof. So I didn't guess Buffalo Trace on the blind. I asked the buddy, he's like, what is it? He's like, oh, it's Blandon's from the 90s. And like, oh, this is why people to this day freak out about Blandon's. That's why it's one of the most sought after products I feel like in the market.
This is delicious.
Yeah,
it's really good.
Oh my gosh.
And the horsey.
And the horse.
Yeah.
That's what I was going to say, the marketing,
Got to
right?
catch them all, you know. You
Got to get all the letters.
Hey, it's a cool bottle.
But I'm drinking that Anderson.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
you.
Yeah.
I'm drinking that Anderson Club as well. So, Rob, you said it's really good.
Yeah,
that's
I
one that's
never
like
heard of this.
86 proof, drinks way above that, full bodied, like
15 years.
very robust,
That's absolutely delicious.
great finish. Yeah, it's phenomenal.
Whose
And-
bottle? Who brought that?
I brought that.
Wow, thank you.
But it's one of those bottles that like a year ago maybe they were selling for like $190
Really?
secondary.
For a 15-year-old.
Yeah, for a 15-year-old from 1996,
Well, it's
so it's
because-
still 81. You know.
I mean, people chase proof, right? So
Yeah.
that's one of the reasons that you can get one.
But
Yep.
I was talking to Carter about this earlier. Right now, with the economy and everything, I feel like prices in general for everything are kind of falling, except for Dusty's.
Yeah.
Like Dusty's continue to make this trajectory forward because once they're not, we can't replicate them. We
Yeah, when they're
can't.
gone, they're gone.
When they're gone,
Yeah.
they're gone. Whereas like people are realizing that maybe paying $250 for Weller 12 is kind of silly, because they're going to make more next year, and in 10 years from now they're going to make 3 times as much as they.
And it's the same.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I agree with you. We kind of got into the I'll say overseas market. I think it's not just Japan. I think, I have a wild turkey from like Italy from 1999. But you think about wild turkey being over there, and obviously the Blanton's was big over there. Are there some other bigger, well-known brands of today that are still released over there or were released over there that are sought after? I can only think of the Blanton's when you think about the green, the red, the black. It used to be the, straight from the barrel and the gold you couldn't get here, but now we can. Well, we can't get it, but it's released. I mean, it's just not on the shelf. But are there some other products that are overseas that are coveted besides those two?
The big one that I can think of is it's not whiskey but rum. So
Yeah.
It's
Belliere,
huge rum market.
in Italy, the old Diamond. They had the foresight kind of to buy some of the best rum ever made from the Caribbean. And they were one of the first ones to release it back in the late 90s.
So it makes me ask the
80s and
question:
90s.
can any spirit be a Dusty?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay.
Yeah, I was going to ask about tequila and mezcal. That's Lewis's.
Yeah.
My forte.
And that's what I like the 70th anniversary El Tesoro.
Stop telling people.
Oh,
about
my
it, bro.
God.
So one
Stop
of,
telling people
So
about
good.
it.
There's a dusty tequila that I picked up. There was some old Casa Noble in those kind of purple or those decanter bottles.
Yeah.
Those are pretty good. There was came in a black. The Añejo was a black bottle. Those are
Okay.
some pretty good dusties.
Yeah, so the problem with, the agave, the fact that older agave was better was because at that time, same thing with Glenn whiskey, nobody was drinking it. So they were trying to make the best quality product so that they could sell it because nobody was buying it. Now that everything has gotten popular, so I don't know if you know about the agave plant, but it takes a long year for agave to mature.
Right.
A long year.
It takes a lot of years for
A long year.
It takes a long
one
time,
long year.
or
As
a lot
compared
of,
to a short year.
or a lot of years for the agave plant to mature. So most people that are producing really high quality tequila are harvesting agaves that are, I don't know, let's say 8 to 9 years old, maybe 7 to 9 years old. There are people that are out there producing tequila from agaves that are 5 years old, 4 years old.
Yeah,
3
if I was
years
going to say
old.
4, I feel like the 6 to 7 is probably good now, and then the lower end of the spectrum is probably 4, and that's the release that we picked up is wild harvested agave.
And that's
for
another
tequila.
thing.
It's 10 years old.
Before it used to be all wild harvested agave, but now it's being farmed. And if we go even further into mezcal, some of those varietals take like Karwinski per se. Those plants take at least 15 years to mature. Some of them 25, 30 years. So it takes forever to get that plant. It grows as big as this room, and they can make a single varietal mezcal from that plant. So the older stuff, they could wait a little bit longer. Then
You can't give them too much information. They got to go listen to the episode.
Oh yeah,
yeah.
Go to the tequila.
There's
Yes.
a tequila episode. With
Scroll
Leo
scroll
and
down,
Luis.
scroll down a little
Scroll
bit.
down,
You'll
click
find
that
out.
one.
Tequila episode.
Yeah, the
But yes.
interesting contrast between Scotch and particularly mezcal is, or bourbon. The bourbon and Scotch age in the barrel. Mezcal ages in the field.
Oh, that's a good
Yeah.
point.
Well, and one of the things that I find interesting is that a lot of it will be age stated in glass too before it's bottled. So they'll batch it and then they'll let it rest before it's bottled.
Yeah, I think we
Mezcal.
talked about it in the mezcal podcast, but like a really cool tradition in Oaxaca is when you're born, the master distiller will make a batch of mezcal for you when you're born, and then they put in these giant glass globes and they'll bury it. And when you get married, they dig it up, and that's what everybody drinks. So
You celebrate with that.
yeah, but so
That's cool.
it's been aging, but in glass and like in a sterile environment. Something like similar to eau de vies, like Rochelle or Raquel, that are aged in glass globes for 10, 15, 20 years.
That's pretty cool.
But they don't interact with the wood. You're kind of just letting the spirit kind of settle into itself over a very prolonged
But
period of time.
you prefer
Coagulate.
that anyway, don't you?
Oh.
That without the wood?
Yeah, yeah. If we're talking mezcal,
Yeah.
Imagine taking a plant that's been living for 30 years. You're
And then-
you're taking it, the most beautiful expression of it, and then you just throw it in a barrel to get vanilla caramelly. It's like
You
that's,
ruin it.
What do? Yeah, that's not why we. That's
Yeah.
not what we seek out that spirit for. You know.
Okay, let's talk about a few things that we have on the table, and one would be, can you guys talk about the wild turkey and the differences? Obviously you see the cheesy gold foil, you see the 12-year, then you see the 12-year split label. Is there a
And then the faux split label, and then the beyond
Well, I
duplication.
think all the
rare breed?
I think all the 12-year dusty stuff is split label, right?
Yeah.
What do you mean 12-year dusty? Because I have a 12-year. Oh, but
So dusty is in old release versus the current release that they just did.
Well,
Like,
there
I have
is
a
a
12-year
12-year
from-
split from the 90s.
So I have a 99 12-year that's not split label in a tube.
Yeah.
That is
Yeah,
101
that-
proof,
that's-
right?
But it's 101. This
Yeah.
is 101, right?
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
101.
Yeah, everything's 101.
That's what I thought.
And they also have like the beyond duplication, and then obviously the cheesy gold foil. So they're all the same.
But is there anything different in the juice? What makes
all the same mash bill.
Unless it's just in the blending, it's the same juice. Unless they blend a little differently, did it take from different levels of the rick house for different products?
So let me
That's
ask
the,
this:
That's the
on
only thing would be.
the cheesy gold foil, to my recollection, is like the most sought after, or at least the most expensive.
Well,
I think
the
that
most
might
out of it
be
is,
the-
the
I think-
tribute. The 15-year
Yeah,
yeah.
tributes are
The donuts
the
are
most-
also big.
Okay, well, on the cheesy gold foil, though, I bring that up because I want to ask: is it thought that obviously, if it says 12-year on it, that's the youngest whiskey in the bottle? Is it thought that
Correct.
there's like much older in the cheesy gold foils
No.
versus like the split label?
I mean,
Or is it just to say I have a cheesy gold foil?
I would say it's the Carter effect, which is it looks pretty.
It's a
It
cool
does.
bottle.
Yeah.
I will say though, I've seen like I don't know if it's like 90 or like 89 or something like that on the cheesy gold
Yeah, like a
foils.
certain vintage.
There is some of that stuff that looks so dark.
That's
I'm
what I
like,
was going to say. Is the darkness to me would be like one of the things that varies. But I feel like the darkness can also vary between like different batches of the 1855,
Oh, sure.
as well as the 8101. But yeah, I think I know what you're talking about. There's a particular year that people will chase for the CGFs.
Yeah.
But I have heard from people that are like, hey, you're pretty much just paying a premium for that type of release compared to like some folks say, hey, if you get like a 94 8101, you can get one that can drink a lot better than a CGF, for example.
Yeah. Yeah, I
And
mean,
much better value.
I've never had CGF, so I don't know. I don't even know what it tastes like. I know I was talking to you about it one time, Luis, and you were saying, yeah, it was good, but it wasn't like
So with all those products, I mean, I guess it just depends on your budget. If you have unlimited amounts of money, like, yes, buy it. But for me, I feel like the 8101s, I'd rather have 3 8101s than one cheesy Gulf.
Well, even if you're
I'm
looking
with you. I'm a volume guy.
even like budget wise, if you're looking like to get your toes in the water, you can get some of the tradition bottles for like $325, which are not age stated. They're Japanese or overseas releases,
Or the 1855.
or the 1855, which is
It's about
Those are climbing,
$4.50 now.
yeah.
which is basically the same thing as the
It's rare breed, but just the Euro releases.
Why do we see so many of the Euro releases versus the old rare breed label? Is it just people didn't buy them overseas and they've become available? They're just sitting on the shelves over there?
Yeah, I think I don't know the exact reason, but I would venture to say that it didn't sell as much as, like, those bottles.
Did they make a
hung
ton
out.
more of that over there than they released here? Probably too. A part of it.
Probably two in the glut area, but I don't know the exact amount made, but I would just say, like,
Yeah.
they weren't drinking a lot of bourbon in Europe, maybe as much as here, if not less. So those bottles actually survived.
Because I like these, but the more I've seen on the few occasions I have that rare breed label from back then, I'd like to find one of those. Those are pretty cool.
Yeah, you just pay more for it.
Do you pay more for it?
Oh yeah,
significantly more. Yeah,
significantly more. Yeah.
Then I like
So
this.
I'd
I
always
like
go
this
with-
label.
I'd
Yeah, I
always
like
go
the
with this one. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I kind of don't even like talking about it because it's already started to pick up in popularity. But those 1855s are some of your better buys that are out there.
Yeah.
One of the first times we hung out, we're like, oh, if you like Dusty Turkey, you should get on these 1855s because the same as rare breed, but just Euro releases.
Yeah.
And that's when they were relatively cheap still, and now they're about double what they were from when you got me on.
And when you say this, it's exactly the same, right?
Exactly.
As rare breed.
Same bottle.
It would appear to be the same. I can't confirm that, but it looks like it's the same.
Batch
So if it's a
numbers are very
92,
similar.
92, it's
I guess it would be
Same
proof.
year release.
Is it proof point the same as the
proof
the
points
same
the
year
same
as
for the year.
I mean, I'd have to look it up to confirm, but it's the same bottle.
They're just really good.
Yeah, very similar in design. The batch numbers are very similar.
Yeah. I actually kind of like the label on this one better than the
Yeah,
rare
so
breed
do I.
label because I like that it says the 1855 on there. Like I guess that's
Reserve.
But I guess that's when turkey was.
Yeah,
founded or
I was
something like
thinking about peeling the labels off of bottles and making like a scrapbook out of it.
Oh, that'd be cool. Yeah. Very tater, but cool.
Oh, yeah, that's another tater item.
I'm just kidding.
Can we all agree
Wade
we're-
just updated that.
We're all taters.
Oh yeah, I mean,
yeah,
come on.
absolutely.
Okay.
I mean, I've got candles
So-
in my house with a cheesy gold foil and
I was sending somebody a bottle this week, and I called my wife. She was at the grocery store. I was like, "Hey, buy me a potato," and I put a potato in the box. With
Did
the
you
bottle
really?
that I sent, yeah.
That's pretty cool. And I always appreciate, Wade keeps the last number on his list. Whatever he adds to it is one prior to any guy who makes a tater list is a tater.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So, okay, let's finish up with this. Is there, Alan? We're gonna finish with you. I don't have an answer. I'm sure the Matt and Luis and Leo do. But is there a bottle that you want to buy but you haven't been able to find it yet? That's a Dusty. Is there something out there that you go, as soon as I see one of these, I want to get one?
I would say you could buy anything. You can find anything you want. It's just, do you
It's
want
his price.
Yeah, can you
Yeah.
afford it?
So what would be on my buy list if I just won this
Unlimited amount of money,
$1.3
yeah.
billion lottery, Wild Turkey Tribute.
I'll buy it for you tomorrow.
Okay.
I'll take one too.
That would be one of mine as well. Like, there's so many people that have said that's like
Which
top
one
five.
is it? I'm sorry, I missed it.
Wild
The
Turkey
tribute, the one we were talking about. It's a 15-year, and there was
Yeah.
2 releases. There was a Euro release and stateside release.
And there's a debate on which one people like better. I think the Euro release is a little higher proof than the American release. I've had them both, and
Those are
good.
running what, 1,500 now?
15 to
think-
they may be pushing
Yeah, I
2,000.
think they're
Pushing $2,000 a bottle. So I had American Spirit, which is 15 years, and that was bottled in bond. That one was really good. And people were like, that is good, but the the tribute is like a whole nother
The tribute
level.
is pretty amazing.
And at the time, I picked up the American Spirit for like $350, which, recently those are going for almost $1,000 now. And I was just like, this is amazing for $350. I think maybe I'll buy another one of these instead of spending $1,000 on a tribute.
Yeah.
Right.
But yeah.
But the next one would be before Pappy Van Winkle became a name. It was Old Rip Van Winkle, and they had a 15-year version in the early 2000s, which I don't know, may have been Bernheim. It would make sense that would be Bernheim era, but either way, that's one of the best bourbons I've had. Old Rip Van Winkle 15.
What was the proof on that? Because I think about Lot B being 90 and then 107 on the 10.
Yeah, it would be 107.
107.
So all the old rips are 107,
Yeah.
same as OWA.
Except for Lot B.
Well, it's not. That's not a.
It's not an
Well,
old Rip
19.
Van Winkle?
No.
So those are yeah. So the old Rip Van Winkle is a 10-year. It used to be a 10-year back then.
The
it was a
Wizard bottle.
15-year. Yeah.
Wizard
so those are all
Pappy.
107, and that's why most modern people, including myself, like I would almost always rather have the old Rip versus the Lot B. Because the old Rip is 2 years younger, but it's 107 proof. Whereas
Agreed.
the Lot B is 90 proof.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A blind I've wanted to do was the Lot B versus.
12.
Yeah. Have you done it?
Yeah.
Have you done it, Alan?
Yeah. It's basically every time I've gotten a Lot B, I sell it.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
If you get this year's, I tried this year's and it's not good.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah, this year's is especially not good.
So it's a tater bottle.
Yeah.
What else are you chasing?
What would I be chasing in terms of Dusties?
With the unlimited funds that you have.
I mean, it's hard. It's like unlimited funds. I almost think that I would just buy a lot of Dusty Wild Turkey. It's just something that just always really hits the spot for me.
Yeah.
In terms of like,
Go ahead.
in terms of like big bottles, there's nothing that if I had so much money, I would just run out and grab that bottle right now. Probably, I'm talking about Dusty Turkey, one of the tributes. Like I've never had the opportunity to try it. So many of people have said it's in their top 5. So I'd really like the opportunity to try that one.
Probably one of the best bottles I ever tried was I think it was either like a 90 or a 91 107 Gold Vein. And I don't know if it's just, like I said, I've never tried Weller 107 from Bernheim versus Stitzel side by side or whatever, but I just remember in the moment thinking man, that is absolutely delicious.
Who produced the Gold Vein?
Stitzel.
That's what I thought it was.
Yeah.
And that may be, not thinking of it when you ask me the question, like those gold veins, because some of those are, almost a handful,
Well,
$1,000. Like
Yeah.
you're approaching like 4 or 5K on those bottles now.
Yeah, they're super expensive.
Yeah.
And are they worth it? Probably not, but
Do you know what they sold for on the shelf?
oh god, what? $15.
Yeah, not much.
Well, I remember, I don't know when he bought it, but Randy Blank shared one, and that was going to be something I would going to say would be the bottle I would want again because it was fantastic, and he still had the orange, gun, $34.99,
Oh yeah,
and I go, so how much did you pay? And he goes, no, I bought it. That's what I bought.
that's
this
what you
bottle.
bought it for.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
It's
cool.
like you got to be kidding.
I'd also say the I guess it's the old granddad the 114 that's I guess national or whatever. Though that is ridiculous. I tried it one time. It's absolutely absurd. So good.
Yeah, I got a birth year bottle of that.
Nice.
And it's almost gone.
yeah.
Yeah, the other one that you'd chase would be some of the early Willets. There's some 24-year-old Willets.
Oh yeah.
Those.
Well,
I've not had much
Especially
of
for
that.
me, the rye.
Well, it's interesting when you say you don't really consider that a Dusty. When were those released? Early 2000s?
Some of those are mid 2000s, maybe.
Really?
I was going to say early 2000s, so not 90s.
Not 90s. No, 2000s. To,
Yeah.
I mean, I've done the bourbon. It's the bourbon get together where they do the gazebo event. I was there in 2012.
Yeah.
2012 with Wade.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
And I remember going into Willett, and they had some 24-year-olds, and it was like $200 or something, So,
Yeah.
Wow.
And so it's interesting. So I wouldn't consider that Dusty, but in terms of have had a blank checkbook.
Yeah.
Because the guys that were chasing Willett back in the day, because it was all sourced, and so it was, Bernheim may have been some other stuff. I'm not very knowledgeable about it because I don't have an unlimited checkbook, and that's what it would take for me to be knowledgeable about it today. But some of those bottles, like Luis was talking about, that pinhook rye going for red hook rye going for an absorbent amount. What number did you say?
I think like 45 is the last one.
So some of those Willets are going for plus 20 grand right now.
Yeah.
Which is, it's crazy to think about. And I don't think about that when you talk about Dusty, but being released in the mid 2000s and it's a 20-year-old whiskey, it definitely qualifies.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Super high age statement.
Anything you're chasing, Luis?
El Tesoro
That
70th.
if your boss gives you permission, you want to buy?
Like if I had
She looked
unlimited
up.
funds, El Tesoro 70th all
Yeah.
day. Red Hook Rye. Some of those older Bernheim, the squat 15-year-old rips are incredible. One thing that was always on what got me into bourbon was Weller Antique. So the gold vein to me was like the unicorn of unicorns.
Well, I think it's also like that's the Carter effect too. Like that bottle is just like
He keeps
it's a
saying Carter
showpiece.
It is a showpiece.
It is the Carter. Well,
it's
I'm thinking
beautiful.
like that's your thing is the showpiece
Yeah,
bottle.
it's a
So-
cool looking bottle. Yeah.
So that is like if you got a surplus and you're just like, what do I want to have on my top shelf? You got to have a gold vein.
I know. I feel like I'm missing out that I don't have one.
Well, just
Change that.
All you do is just send a Venmo and you're good.
But also some of those old Pennsylvania ryes, like the 1910s, 20s,
Can you find
Pennsylvania
those?
ryes. If you have enough money, you can find any.
I was going to say you have a long year to get on Santa's nice
Hey.
list.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, those would be like my top 3 for me.
Okay, let me finish with. We'll close the podcast out with this question: could store picks, barrel picks, become the new kind of? I don't want to call it a Dusty, but the craze for because it's such a limited thing. When something gets out in public that is thought to be a great pick, people want to get these, and then the cost goes up, and they go because you see that to a degree already.
Yeah, I was going to say like I feel like they kind of already have two completely different things, and then I would say there's also like some subcategories there, which is store picks that are tatered up with like wax and all this other stuff versus people that taste a store pick and then they buy as much of that pick as possible because it's a honey barrel. And that's what I would say is most in line with the new Dusty is that if you're just doing it based off of taste and quality of the whiskey and you taste something, you're like, oh, this is head above shoulders of other picks and the shelf product. So I'm just going to buy as much of it as I can. And I'm not going to try to move it. I'm not going to talk about it much because I just want to have as much as this as possible for myself. Right. And I feel like that's what, when people learned about Dusties like Allen, when they were still available, they were just like, hey, I'm the only person I'm doing this is for me because this is just great whiskey compared to what I can get otherwise. So I want to get as much of it as possible so that I can enjoy it and I can also enjoy it with the people that I care about and the people that I meet and introduce into, the hobby that I'm in right now. And so I would say that's where the store picks come in for me is the honey barrel aspect.
Okay.
I think the store picks have already jumped the shark. When you go back when they first started, you're talking Randy Blank. He was picking
with the
Julian
first
Van
one
Winkle.
ever.
Yeah.
So that's some of the early stuff. That's phenomenal. As you go to the more modern era, I started doing barrel picks around 2013. It wasn't a big thing then, so you were getting good samples. We had some good things to choose from.
Well,
And now everybody's doing it, so the samples you're getting are not that good.
The quality, right?
The quality. You're lucky to get something that's really good, unique. So so if you start chasing it, you better know what you're chasing because the person picking it may have just picked that's the best one that they gave me, but it's
still not that good.
It's still not that good. And
Yeah.
I do that on some of the picks that we're asked to do. I'll tell the store, this is the best of that bottle. This is the best sample we got.
But it's just okay.
If you want to bring it in, but don't put my name on it.
Yeah, because it's not better than the shelf
It's,
version.
it's
right?
not better than the shelf version.
Yeah, it doesn't.
But it's going to sell.
It doesn't get the stamp of approval, right?
Right.
For me, when you asked that question, the two things that popped in my head right away was, first of all, like we were talking about Jim Beam. For a while, we were getting
I know where you're
12 to 15 year Knob Creek picks.
Age statement, yeah.
Those are gone forever.
And those are such great value. Like, I kick myself looking back.
$50.
Like, oh, my
Oh, I know.
For
So many
15
of them
year,
suck.
Well, you never thought they were going away.
Yeah.
Because they were everywhere.
Yeah, and now that they're gone, you're like,
It's like they disappeared overnight.
So that's the first thing that popped off, and the second thing that you were talking about how group picks from very highly regarded groups and palettes are like the new kind of dusty thing, and like you see it. We've circled back on the secondary pricing, but like T5C picks, 1789B picks, the old heads that were doing it before it was cool, the guys that got in when they were the only ones really drinking bourbon.
So the quality of barrel, like when they rolled out barrels for a group back in the day, like Alan's saying, like 2013, not a lot of people were doing picks. The quality was so far superior to what they're getting today because everybody's doing.
They were
picks,
rolling
right?
out the best barrels for you because you had a relationship with them and you were helping them sell bourbon and everything. And like now, to the point where like when you know the new Buffalo Trace system where they like
they just
people that
kicked
they've had
out the old groups.
people
Yeah.
that have had relationships with for like 20 years that have been doing barrel picks with them every year. They're like, we don't need you anymore because we're selling enough on our own. So those picks I feel like are even going to skyrocket because now I don't say everybody gets a pick, but through their lottery system or like there's so many people picking barrels that maybe don't have the experience, the palettes or whatever. So now a pick doesn't necessarily mean as much. So if it's a pick from a group of palettes that you know you can really trust, it's going to be a lot more sought after in value than otherwise.
Or if they're not willing to say no, I don't want any of these. We did that experience with a Knob Creek. We got 3 Knob Creek samples and tasted through them and said, no, I'll pass.
Yeah.
They brought us 3 more.
Oh, they did?
They did. And we picked 2 of those. And so you got to be able to say no if it's not that good.
Do stores worry about that? You know, because if
for
they
sure.
say
Yeah.
no, they're not going to get
Well, they do though. They do.
They worry that they're not going to get they want the bottle. So so they worry if you're going to say no. But
So like Knob Creek, for example, or Buffalo Trace, like there's stores that work very hard to get their first Buffalo Trace pick, right? And maybe that's an Eagle Rare, and then they send them samples. They don't even get to bring people to the distillery, and they're thinking like, hey, if we don't take one of these 3, they might not give us another opportunity to participate in the pick program.
Yeah.
So I think that is more prevalent than people passing, and it should be the other way around, right?
Yeah. We had we did a Cavalier pick, and we had a couple of bottles of Cavalier that we brought just to try in comparison, and none of the samples were as good as what we bought off the shelf.
Oh, wow.
We rejected them, and the local rep just got totally pissed off. I
Yeah.
mean, he wouldn't even give the store any more samples. It was so.
That's
the
what I
risk.
think they worry about. If they don't take something, they're not going to get another opportunity to get something. Guys, thanks for doing this. I've got a little more educated on what Dusties are and kind of how to categorize them and what Leo's after.
Now you're going to fall down the rabbit hole.
No. I don't have, like you, pockets that just never end.
oh, wow. Called out.
You can always make
He
more.
didn't argue that point, did he?
You can always make more.
Yeah.
Alan, thank you very much for coming on and doing the show. Appreciate it.
Enjoy it. Thanks for the invite.
Thanks, guys, for doing this. Thanks, everybody, for listening to this episode of Food, Wine, and Whiskey. And until our next episode, enjoy your next pour.